Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that he won't be attending the UN's COP27 climate change conference in Egypt. COP is, of course, a major annual event organised by the UN where world leaders meet to try and tackle the impending climate disaster. Speaking to Sky News, Sunak explained his decision.
Well, look, I'm really proud, as everyone should be, about our record on tackling climate change, and particularly with regard to COP. I think everyone will remember that last year we hosted one of the most significant COPs in recent time. And that was important because what we did there was set the targets and the roadmap for the world to follow if we're going to meet our climate ambitions. And I think actually everyone should also be really proud of how we're doing. We're one of the countries that has decarbonised the fastest. We now get over half our energy from zero carbon sources. We passed a landmark law to protect the environment. And under my government, we're going to continue to deliver on all of those things.
Labour say it's a massive failure of leadership.
No, the leadership that we have shown on the climate is unmatched almost along the world. If you look at what we've done in this country, we're an example for others to follow at the pace in which we've reduced climate emissions, how we're going about protecting our environment. And those things are really important to me. It's important to me that as Prime Minister, we leave behind an environment that is better for our children and grandchildren. I'm very passionate about that. I'm very personally committed to it. And I just think at the moment, it's right that I'm also focusing on the pressing domestic challenges we have with the economy. And I think that's what people watching would reasonably expect me to be doing as well.
So Sunak's story, he's staying at home to prepare the autumn budget due on the 17th of November. He clearly hasn't heard of multitasking. Environment Secretary Therese Coffey appeared on the BBC, where she let slip what the government really thinks of COP.
Do you understand how it looks with the Prime Minister not going? If he really felt that this was very important, not just for this country, but for the world to address, he would be there. He would show his face, wouldn't he?
Well, so normally it's the case that these sorts of big political gatherings where you have the heads of state or the prime ministers only happens every 5 years. We've been admirably led in the presidency this year by my friend Alok Sharma. And I think it's key that recognising this is following on from what has been a big political moment last year, this being an implementation kind of COP. And it's I'm not aware, for example, that, say, President Macron is going. But it's important that we, of course, continue domestically and internationally. And that's what we're doing, including through my new department of DEFRA.
In a later interview on LBC, Coffey described COP27 as, quote, just a gathering of people in Egypt. We've also got a little fact for Therese, which is that French President Emmanuel Macron is attending, and it's been reported that Joe Biden also plans to go too. He hasn't officially confirmed, but that's from sources close to him. It also gets worse because while you could argue economic chaos means Sunak will genuinely have a lot on his plate this November, that can't explain why the Tories have banned King Charles from going. Charles, who has expressed an interest in environmental issues for a long time now, was asked not to go to COP27 by Liz Truss. When asked about whether Sunak would overturn that ban, a Downing Street spokesperson said this: as is standard practice, government advice was sought and provided under a previous Prime Minister, and it was unanimously agreed that it would not be the right occasion for the King to visit in person. I'm not aware that advice has changed. With Charles and Sunak out, the three people who are set to be going to Egypt are Environment Secretary Therese Coffey, who you just saw, as well as President of COP26, Alok Sharma, and Climate Minister Graham Stewart. But in another dumbfounding move, when Sunak reshuffled his cabinet earlier this week, he demoted both Sharma and Stewart. Now, neither the COP president nor the climate minister remain as cabinet positions. And that means that the ministers most qualified to advise on avoiding climate catastrophe aren't even in the room. It's hardly what you'd expect from a prime minister who says he wants to take climate change seriously. And the snub by Sunak comes at a crucial time. His decision comes just a day after the United Nations found there is currently no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees in place. 1.5 degrees is, of course, the maximum increase UN scientists have said we can tolerate before risking catastrophic climate change. And the target is enshrined in 2015's Paris Agreement. As it stands, the UN suggests that current climate pledges with a 2030 deadline would still lead to a 2.5 degrees Celsius rise in global temperatures. That in turn would cause catastrophic weather around the world. Inga Anderson is the executive director of the UN Environment Programme. She said this: this report tells us in cold scientific terms what nature has been telling us all year through deadly floods, storms, and raging fires. We have to stop filling our atmosphere with greenhouse gases and stop doing it fast. We had our chance to make incremental changes, but that time is over. Only a root and branch transformation of our economies and societies can save us from accelerating climate disaster. It's a tall and some would say impossible order to reform the global economy and almost halve greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, but we must try. Every fraction of a degree matters to vulnerable communities, to ecosystems, and to every one of us. Aaron, what do you make of Sunak's snub to the climate conference? Is this a big deal?
Well, there's a couple of ways of looking at this, Michael. So Tony Blair never went to COP. Gordon Brown just went once. David Cameron just went once. Boris Johnson just went once. So if you're on the right or a conservative, you could say, well, this is just hypocrisy from the left and from Labour. Again, they never went. Blair never went. That's true. On the other hand, clearly climate change has become a more salient political issue in recent years. There's a reason why Boris Johnson went. There's a reason, for instance, why Gordon Brown went even in 2010 when Blair didn't. I think it's fair to say, 2009 rather, that it just became a more salient issue over time. I think that's inarguable. With regards to the specifics here, though, it makes absolutely no sense that Sunak isn't going. Because yes, the issue's become more salient. The global public's talking about it. It's shot up, sort of policy areas that the electorate cares about. That wasn't the case in the 2000s when Blair didn't go. You've got the sort of Telegraph and the Mail. That's what they'll say. That's what they'll trot out. Blair never went. Why should Sunak? Well, it's a very different political context right now. And we're also getting far more dire warnings. But also there's the business case, which I don't quite understand, Michael. Decarbonisation between now and 2060 for the global north and south is going to be worth hundreds of trillions of dollars. That might sound ridiculous. It's larger than I think global GDP is probably, God knows, north of $100 trillion a year. But we're talking, of course, over here, 38 years, 40 years. It's huge amounts of money. And, Britain says that in terms of green finance, it wants to be a world leader. In terms of the technologies, it wants to be a world leader. Well, if you want to be a world leader in what's clearly going to be a very valuable area for profit, if that's what you want, I don't think markets and capitalism can address the climate crisis, but Rishi Sunak does. If you did believe that, why wouldn't you be at the most important show on earth when it comes to the climate crisis? We covered COP last year in Glasgow. It's not just policymakers and politicians and activists. There's business people there. There's lobbyists there. All the big brands are there in terms of hydrocarbon companies, car companies, and whatnot. Companies parading the technological solutions they think can address the crisis. There is absolutely no business/commercial case for Rishi Sunak to not be there. None at all. In terms of the UK's kind of profile as a climate leader, trying to attract investment, for instance, in lithium-ion battery technology, talking to major multinationals and getting them to set up shop here in the UK, there is no argument against that at all. So the only reason why he's not going, Michael, is because of internal political optics. They've knocked fracking on the head, which was smart. There was never a business case for it anyway. It wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to reduce the price of hydrocarbons in this country. We've talked about repeatedly. Global energy prices, there's a market, and that's what you produce the stuff for, to sell it on a global market of gas or of fuel or coal or whatever. Those are global prices. Just because extracted from here in the UK doesn't mean we magically get it cheaper, if only. I mean, if it was publicly owned, yes, but that's not what the Tories are proposing. Surprise, surprise. So they knocked fracking on the head. And I think, just like I say, for pure internal political optics, he won't be going to COP, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous from the point of view of what you're talking about with regards to the climate crisis. But even if you are a green capitalist like Mark Carney, an evangelist for markets and capitalism being able to solve this problem, I'm not. But if you are one of those, of course you'd want the Prime Minister there. Of course you'd want the King there. Makes no sense whatsoever. As is so often the case, the internal ruptures in the Conservative Party are more important than actually doing what's best for the country and doing what's best for the future of the country over the next 40, 50, 60 years.